A good Chodesh, everyone. Today was Rosh Chodesh, Aleph Nissan. We entered a very special, unique month, the month of Nissan. The Shiur writes, there's a famous Chazal, Ilmole Shomru Yisrael Shtei Shabbosos. If the Bnei Yisrael would have kept two Shabbosos, a very famous Chazal, Miyad Hoyinu Galim, we would have been redeemed. The Geula would have come if we would have kept two Shabbosim. So the Kedusha says, which two Shabbosim? There are a lot of different pshatim, different explanation about these two Shabbosim. So the Kedusha says, which two Shabbosim are Chazal referring to? The two Shabbosim in the month of Nisan. It's this Shabbos and the coming Shabbos. These two Shabbosim, keeping Shabbos, a very special, unique time. Miyad hoyinu galim, we would have been redeemed. The Shemesh Shmuel, the Sachachaver Rebbe, he asks a very interesting question. It says in the Torah, and Rashi explains it, the Gemara says it, that Moshe Rabbeinu was standing on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, on the Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and he told the Bnei Yisrael, Vayikra, you shall take Sel Aboyis, in the 10th day of Nisan, you shall take a lamb for the Korban Pesach, for the sacrifice of the Pesach. So asks the Shemesh Shmuel, why is it that Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Bnei Yisrael on Rosh Chodesh that they should take the Korban Pesach the 10th day of Nisan? Why not tell it to the Bnei Yisrael, give it over to the Bnei Yisrael on the 10th of Nisan? Give it over that day. Yes, the Bnei Yisrael needed to have the Korban Pesach 4 days before, because they had to check it every day, as we know, every day from the 10th of Nisan till Yudalid Nisan, which is the day of the Shchitas HaPesach, which is the day when the Korban Pesach is being brought as a Korban. So 4 days, there was a halacha that they had to check every day to see that it doesn't have a blemish, it doesn't have a mum. But that would have been perfectly fine for Moshe Rabbeinu to give it over on the 10th day of Nisan. And the 10th day of Nisan, all the Bnei Yisrael, they'll take the Korban Pesach on the 10th day, and they'll do the checking for the next 4 days. Why was it that Moshe Rabbeinu gave it over already on Rosh Chodesh, on the beginning of the month of Nisan, and not on the 10th of Nisan? Says the Shemesh Shmuel, he says an amazing zach. He says, the Bnei Yisrael were unfortunately immersed. They were unfortunately very involved in Avodah Zarah. We know, Chazal teach us, Rashi says it as well. Moshe Rabbeinu says, Mishchu, pull to yourself, ukchu, and take, Sel Aboyis, a lamb for each house. Each person should take a lamb to prepare themselves for the Korban Pesach, to prepare themselves for Yetzias Mitzrayim. So Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Bnei Yisrael, everyone should be mishchu, they should pull, ukhu, and they should take. It seems like it's repetitive. Mishchu, pull, ukhu, and take. When you pull, you take. So why does it say these two? Why does it say mishchu, pull it, ukhu, and take it? So Rashi quotes the Chazal, Mishchu yedechem avodah zarah. Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Bnei Yisrael, pull yourself, remove yourself from the idol worshipping that you are involved. In other words, in Mitzrayim, the Bnei Yisrael were unfortunately involved in idol worshipping. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, Mishchu, pull yourself away from doing the avodah zarah, kchu, and take for yourself the lamb, which is going to be a sacrifice to the Rebbeinu Shalom, to the Melech Malchei Amlochim. So in other words, the Bnei Yisrael had to remove themselves from the Avodah Zarah, which they were unfortunately immersed in, and they had to transfer. In other words, they had to, instead of doing Avodah Zarah, get into doing the Korban Pesach. So says the Shemesh Shmuel, the Sachachover Rebbe, Moshe Rabbeinu wanted the Bnei Yisrael to start removing themselves from the Avodah Zarah, not on the 10th day of Nisan. He wanted them to start on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. They should start working on the Mishchu Ikchu. They should start working on the removing themselves from the Avodah Zarah on the Rosh Chodesh, in order for them to be able to transform into Heilige Yidden, into Oivdei Hashem, serving Hashem, instead of Chas v'Sholom the Avodah Zarah. Says the Shemesh Shmuel, these 10 days have the same Kedusha like Aseres Yimei Tshuva. That's what he says. He says, just like Aseres Yimei Tshuva in the month of Tishrei, the first 10 days in the month of Nisan has this koyach, this Kedusha of Aseres Yimei Tshuva, and this is the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu told the Bnei Yisrael, in the beginning of the month, I want you to now get yourselves into this mindset, into this formation, in becoming a different person. And this is the 10 days where the Bnei Yisrael were working amongst themselves to remove all the shmutz, so to say, from the Avodah Zarah, and get themselves into a pure, heilige mindset of Oivdei Hashem. And this is something, says the Shemesh Shmuel, that happens every single year. Every single year when we enter the month of Nisan, and we go through the first 10 days. The first 10 days are 10 days to transform ourselves, to become Heilige Yidden, and to become better Oivdei Hashem. So we see from the Kedusha Arim the importance of the Shabbosim in this month, and we see from the Shemesh Shmuel the importance of each and every day, the first 10 days of this month, till Asara ben Nisan, till Esa ben Nisan, is are very important days, like Aseres Yimei Tshuva. There is a very powerful idea, which basically goes back to the same idea that we're saying, that the same idea that we're talking about. In the beginning of this week's Parsha, it says, Vayikra El Moshe, a very famous pasuk, the beginning of this week's Parsha. Vayikra El Moshe, Hashem calls to Moshe, Vayidaber Hashem El Moshe, and Hashem spoke to Moshe, Moyel Moyed Leimoy, and then it says, Daber El Bnei Yisrael. So over here, Rashi is bothered, which is a very famous question. What is this Vayikra El Moshe? Hashem calls to Moshe, and then it says, Vayidaber Hashem Elav, Hashem spoke to him. We know all the time in the entire Torah, when it says this, when Hashem speaks to Moshe, right away it says, Vayidaber Hashem El Moshe Leimoy. Why is it that over here it says, Vayikra El Moshe first, and he called to Moshe, and afterwards it says, Vayidaber Hashem Elav, Hashem spoke to him? So Rashi says a very powerful explanation. Rashi says that this Vayikra El Moshe teaches us that every time that Hashem spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu, each and every time, first Hashem called Moshe. There was a calling, Hashem called Moshe first, which is basically giving him the heads up that Hashem is about to speak to him, and afterwards Hashem starts speaking to Moshe. But first, it was Vayikra El Moshe, Hashem calls to Moshe, and then Vayidaber Hashem Elav. So both the Panim Yafos, the Heilige Panim Yafos and the Kedusha Arim, Shnei Neviim Misnabnim Misignen Echad, both explain a very powerful, they point out a very powerful point from this concept that Rashi points out, that first it was Vayikra El Moshe, and then it was Vayidaber El Moshe. So they say, what happened every time when Moshe Rabbeinu spoke, when Hashem spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu, every time there was a hachana, a preparation for the moment that Hashem will speak to him. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu was called by Hashem, which was a signal for Moshe Rabbeinu to prepare himself, to make a hachana. And after doing the preparation, after that, Hashem is Vayidaber Hashem Elav, that's when Hashem spoke to him. Says both the Panim Yofis and the Kedusha are him. You know why? Because when we prepare ourselves, when we make a achana, a preparation to be able to get into a mode of spirituality, of Kedusha, it builds a keli, it makes a vessel that whatever we are going to enter to, it should stay with us. We should take it with us in Yetz Hashem for the rest of the year. We should be able to take the inspiration that we were inspired by, and it should stay for Be'ezus Hashem for the upcoming months and for the entire year to the next Yom Tif. Therefore, we all know when it comes to Hilchos Pesach, there's a halacha that we are obligated to learn the halachas of Pesach 30 days before the Yom Tov of Pesach. Now, besides this simplistic understanding, because there are so many halachas when it comes to Pesach, in order to be able to enter the Yom Tov in a way that we should be well prepared and know all the halachas, know all the different things that we need to know for the Yom Tov, there is a deeper understanding, says the Panim Yofis and the Kedusha Arim. It's for us to make ourselves a vessel as a preparation to this huge moment when the moment of Chag Pesach will approach. So says the Panim Yofis and the Kedusha Arim, they both say, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. They say like this: there were two Nevi'im by Klal Yisrael, very famous Nevi'im in the same era, in the same time. Moshe Rabbeinu and Lahavdil Elef Alfe Avdolis Bilam. The difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and Bilam, obviously there were other differences, but one of the main things that there was a difference between Moshe and Bilam, every time before Hashem speaks to Moshe, Moshe makes a preparation. He is preparing himself, he's making a vessel, he's making himself a vessel to be able to accept the Kedusha, the pureness when Hashem speaks to him. Therefore, this Kedusha was an everlasting Kedusha which Moshe Rabbeinu took with himself, and he was able to go from one madrega, from one level to another, becoming a bigger and a more heilige, pure man. Bilam, that's not what happened by Bilam. It says, Vayikra Elokim El Bilam. By Bilam it was spontaneous. There was the lacking of achana, of preparation, which Moshe Rabbeinu had. Bilam didn't have this privilege of preparing himself before Hashem spoke to him. It was a sudden approach that Hashem approached him. Therefore, says the Kedusha Arim and the Panim Yofis, it had no koyach, it had no strength. It didn't stay with Bilam. Bilam stayed the same shmutzige guy, the same impure guy, the way he was before Hashem spoke to him. Because there was no preparation, there was no vessel to hold this Kedusha that it should stay. And this is what Rashi says, every time Hashem speaks to Moshe Rabbeinu, before that Hashem prepares Moshe for Moshe to be able to make a vessel. Therefore, says the Kedusha Arim, we say in Uvalut Tzion every single day in davening, which Rashi quotes also in this Rashi, we say, V'koro ze el ze v'omar, one malach calls to another one, and each one says, V'omar Baruch Hashem kvoidoi. In other words, the malachim praise Hashem, but it says, V'koro ze el ze, they call to one another. Says the Kedusha Arim, you know what the Targum explains on the word V'kara? V'kara, says the Targum, V'kablum, they accept Deim Medeim from one another. In other words, each malach gives strength and Kedusha and spirit of Kedusha to one another to be able to accept the Kedusha from Hashem. V'kara, according to Targum Onkelos, says the Kedusha Arim, is vikablun, accepting. How could we accept Kedusha? It's through preparation, through Vayikra El Moshe, which is calling to Moshe to prepare himself. So going back to what we said before, what I said before in the idea of Ba'asal HaChodesh from the Shemesh Shmuel and the idea of the Chedusha of the two Shabbosim. Yes, when the month of Nissan enters, which we now enter the month of Nissan, tonight is Beis Nissan. These days are very important days to prepare ourselves, that we should become a vessel, that we should have the keli, so we should be able to stay with this amazing Yom Tiv that we're about to enter, Mi'etz Hashem, in 2 weeks from now. There's another very interesting idea, which is basically the same idea that I mentioned, but from a different point of view. We know the Chassam Sofer talks about this, that we have no mitzvah in our days that we absorb inside beside the mitzvah of Matzah. The mitzvah of Matzah is the only mitzvah d'oraisa, the only chiyuv d'oraisa that we are obligated in our days, which we eat and we basically absorb in our body. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, we had many opportunities. We had the karbanos that we were able to eat, and there was a chiyuv to eat the carbon. In our days, unfortunately, when there's no Beis Hamikdash, the one thing that we still have, which is eating the matzah, which is absorbed in our body. There's a pasuk, says the Tverish Shloima, which is the next week's Parsha on Parshas Tzav. Matzah is te'ochel b'mokom kadosh. The matzah should be eaten in a heilige place. Now the pasuk over there actually speaks about the matzahs of the Korban Toida. But the Tverish Shloima, the Radomsky Rebbe, explains that it also hints the mitzvah of eating matzah. He says, our body, in order for us to have the inspiration that we should be inspired through the eating of matzah, as we know the Zohar HaKadosh says, matzah is michla d'mei menusa. Matzah is emunah food of emunah. When we eat matzah, it increases, it enhances our emunah. Matzah also, says the Zohar HaKadosh, michla d'asvesa. It's food which brings refuah, brings healing. Says the Tverish Shloima, you know when all this is said? If when your body is a heilige body and you bring the matzah into a body which had the appropriate preparation for this heilige Yom Tov of Pesach, then the matzah is eaten b'mokim kadosh. It goes in, it's absorbed in a body which is heilig, and then it has all these strengths which the Zohar HaKadosh mentions. One of the big tzaddikim, his name was Reb Hershel Biala. He was one of the Talmidim of the Lublina, of the Chayza of the Sea of Lublin. He used to say, I always wonder, when I give a Shabbos HaGodel drasha, when I give a drasha for Shabbos HaGodel, people are very into how to prepare the house for Pesach, which is very important. How to prepare the counters, how to kasher, to do the kashering for Pesach. People are very into this. And I always wonder, said the Reb Hershel Biala, why are people not asking, how can we kasher, how can we purify our mouth? That the mouth that will be absorbing the matzah should also be heilig. And the way to absorb, the way to make heilig our mouth, to be able to absorb the matzah in a heilige place, said Reb Hershel Biala, is with tefillah, with Torah, with saying good words to one another, encouraging one another, giving chizuk to one another, eating like a mensch. Our mouth becomes pure, and the achana, the preparation for the Yom Tiv, is done in a good way. And by preparing ourselves and our mouth, and preparing our entire body to absorb the matzah in a heilige body, that's when the matzah has the koyach, which we all hope it should have, to bring refuah and to Be'ezus Hashem bring emunah, that we should be able to strengthen ourselves in emunah. The Kobriner Rebbe, one of the big Rebbes who lived over 150 years ago, he once came out to his Chassidim Erev Pesach, and he asked them, does everyone have already an esrog? And they looked at him, and they said, Rebbe, it's not Sukkot, it's Pesach. What esrog? Why do we need esrog? He says, no, you don't understand. He says, in the Zohar it says, the Zohar calls an esrog dol liba. Our heart, which we all know this, our heart is the esrog. He says, just like before Sukkot, there is a mitzvah to have a pure esrog. Before Pesach, there is a mitzvah to get ready and to prepare ourselves. Our heart should be pure. We should have a pureness when we enter the night of the Seder. So when we do the mitzvah of Achilas Matzah, it should have the effect that it could have. Moving a little bit further, sharing another few powerful thoughts in terms of the preparation of the Heilige Yom Tiv. Now, everyone, we all know, before Pesach, we're all so busy with cleaning, which is one of the things that the Rosh, the Heilige Rosh, writes already in his Sefer on Masechtas Pesachim. He says, Yisrael Kedoshim Heim, the Yidden are Kedoshim, which we put in so much koyach in the achana and the preparation, preparing our homes the best way we could prepare ourselves and the homes and the cars and everything, that it should be pure and it should be clean for Pesach. A very famous Kedusha Levi, Baditchev Rav, which is worthwhile to share. The Baditchev Rav used to say, with our preparation for the Yom Tov of Pesach, we do the same tikkun, the same powerful tikkun that happens, that's done when we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. The same thing happens when we prepare ourselves for Pesach. And he explained. He says, one of the shemus, one of the malachim that are created from the blowing of the shofar is called kashrak. We know one of the sidorim is kashrak, which really means tekiah, shvarim, teruah, tekiah, but kashrak, kuf reish shin kuf. So he says in the Yiddish sprach, in the Yiddish language, he says the kuf, the abbreviation for kuf is kratzen. Kratzen means to rub, to scrub. The shin is sharon. So kratzen is to scrub, and sharon is to basically take away all the shmutz. And the reish is rain, to become pure. And then the kuf is keren, meaning when we do all these preparations for the Yom Tov, for the Pesach Yom Tov, it basically was zoicha to create malachim, that heilige malachim are created in the schus of the preparation of the Yom Tov. A few things before ending the shiur. I'll end the shiur a few minutes before the usual time, but a few very interesting thoughts from the Chassidish Svarim on the month of Nissan, besides what was mentioned before. Reb Baruch of Mezhebish, the Heilige Reb Baruch of Mezhebish, quotes a pasuk which is in Parshas Boy. In Parshas Boy it says, "Va'avadeto es avoida hazois." You shall serve this avoida, you shall do this avoida b'chodesh hazeh, in this month. In other words, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu to give over to Klal Yisrael, to the Yiddish Kindalach, that in the month of Nisan we have this very serious avodah, which we have to bake matzahs, we have to eat matzahs, we have to eat the Korban Pesach, we have to clean our house and clean everything from chametz. Va'avadeto, you shall serve as avodah hazois b'chodesh hazeh. So says Reb Baruch of Mezhebush, a very interesting idea. He says like this. He says there are two very important months in the year. There is the month of Tishrei and there is the month of Nisan. Two very important months. He says in the Torah we find that the month of Tishrei, the expression the Torah uses for the month of Tishrei is Zois. The word Zois is usually used for the month of Tishrei. We see it says B'Zois Yovoy Aharon, which is talking about Aharon's entering to the Kedusha Kedoshim on Yom Kippur. It's the word Zois. Zois, says Reb Baruch of Mezhebish, has to do with the month of Tishrei. Zeh has to do with the month of Nissan. So Hazois, this is Tishrei. Zeh, Zayin Hey, has to do with the month of Nissan. As we see, HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem Rosh Chodashim. So we see the word Zeh has to do with the month of Nissan, which this pasuk talks about Nissan. So says Reb Baruch of Mezhebish, he says like this. He says, we have to appreciate everything that happens. We know that Tishrei is a very important month of focusing, of doing tshuva, of getting closer to Hashem. Everything that happens in the month of Zois, in the month of Tishrei, takes place in the month of Nissan as well. Which means that Nissan is also a time to connect to Hashem, to become a better person, to connect to Hashem and do tshuva ma'ahava, out of love, out of connecting to Hashem. And this is what the pasuk says Reb Baruch of Mezhebish. He says, "Va'avadeto, you shall serve as avodah hazois. You shall keep in mind the month of Tishrei b'chodesh hazeh. Keep in mind in this month of Nisan that whatever takes place, which everyone appreciates, that Tishrei is a very important month for the Hatzlacha and for Bracha for the entire year." Says the Reb Baruch, the Torah teaches us that the month of Nisan also has this koyach, obviously with different avodah, with different ways of doing it, with eating matzah, with singing Hallel, with doing it in a different way. We also have the same koyach, the same strength to bring into the world and for us goodness, bona chayim zoyna, all the goodness. The Shiur, the Divrei Yecheskel says, a famous pasuk, Hayoim atem yoitzim. Hashem tells the Bnei Yisrael, today you are going out, this day you'll be going out, b'chodesh ha'aviv, in the days of Aviv, when it becomes spring. That's when Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. He says, Hayoim, says the Zoyar, means Rosh Hashanah. He says an amazing zach. He says, when a person puts in the proper avodah, the proper preparation, and the proper everything going on in the month of Nisan, if you do it properly, you will be zoicher that the next Rosh Hashanah in Shamayim, they'll basically paskin that you should have a gishmak a year. He says, Hayoim, the day of Rosh Hashanah, atem yoitzim, you go out from your judgment, meaning you'll be judged in favorably through the Chodesh Aviv, through the month of Nisan. Which means through our preparation and through everything that we do now in this month of Nisan, we'll be zoicha to have im Yetz Hashem a good judgment when it comes Rosh Hashanah. Just to finish with one more thought, which basically goes back to everything that we said before. The idea, first I'll share a very cute story that happened, that took place in Eretz Yisrael about 70 years ago. In Eretz Yisrael, there was one of the big Rabbanim going back many years ago. He was the Tepliker Rav. His name was, this is the Rav, he was the Tepliker Rav. And he used to come into shul before Pesach, and he saw too many avreichim, too many young people sitting in shul too many hours, and he felt that they're not doing enough for the wives, they're not helping enough at home. So he wanted to be ma'orer them that they should do more helping to prepare for the Yom Tif. So he came into shul one day, and he knew all these avreichim. He knew exactly who they were, and he basically banged on the bima, and he's got everyone to quiet down from the learning. And he says like this. He says, I have a whole group of ladies who are really desperately in need for chesed to help them prepare for Pesach. Would any of the Avreichim be able to spare some time to do some grocery shopping, to do some help for these ladies? And all of them were like, for sure, chesed opportunity. He said, okay, come and line up. I want to give you a paper, which address to go. So all these Avreichim lined up, and he had written down all the names and the addresses of these Avreichim, because he knew everyone in the shul. It was his shul. And every Avreich came over to him, and he gave every Avreich a closed envelope, and he told the Avreich, open it up when you're outside the shul. And he gave to all the Avreichim an envelope with an address where they should go to help these desperate people who need, desperate ladies who need help. And when they came out of the shul and they opened up the envelope, what was it inside? It was their own address. He was basically hinting them and giving them musar that they should do more helping at home. It says from the Riyah Kadosh, every sweat that we sweat when it comes to prepare ourselves for Pesach, it takes away a lot of chas v'sholem bad, which chas v'sholem, if there's dinim, there's bad judgment in Shemayim. Every sweat that we sweat l'chvoida Pesach, it removes all these badness. And there is a fascinating Pele Yoetz. With this we will end. The Pele Yoetz says, he says that if a person chas v'sholem, if there's a decree chas v'sholem that a person should go in golus, if chas v'sholem, a person, there's dinim, there's judgment on a man that he will be, he has to chas v'sholem go in exile. He says, when we basically don't find our space at home because there's so much things happening at home, we don't find our space at home, this is already the golus, and then we don't have to chas v'sholem go through golus. So by just having the experience of going through the Pesach preparation on its own, without anything else, that on its own is already, Be'ezus Hashem, a tikkun for the golus. So we should all have the schus, we should merit to enter this Yom Tov of Pesach in our right, good mind frame set. We should make the right preparations, prepare ourselves in the next 2 weeks, which I mentioned before from the Kedusha for all these Groisi Yidden, that the next 2 weeks is a very important time to prepare ourselves, to make ourselves a keli, a vessel, to be able to accept this upcoming Yom Tov, which is such a heilig Yom Tov. We should be able to prepare our mouth that it should be heilig for the mitzvah of achilas matzah, of eating matzah, and we should all have the schus to have all the goodness that we all deserve, and we should be zoiche to a lechtige month, to a gewaltige Shabbos Kodesh, and we should have bona chaya mezoyne bebiachs Mashiach tzedkenu b'mheira b'yameinu amen.